From Blackfoot to Teton, we've got your District 6 breakdown right here on the East Idaho Prepcast with Lance Taylor.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome in. It's another edition of the East Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, breaking down everything in Districts 5 and 6 each and every week. Brandon Baney, as always, joined by Lance Taylor. And Lance, you're on the road this week. You are coming to us from a different location.
Well, I've been in Phoenix all week, and now I'm in St. George on my way back, visiting my father.
What a tough life you've got, Arizona and St. George. Wow,
that's right.
Hey,
hot to not quite as hot, but
right.
Still hot.
Yeah. Meanwhile, up here it's still below freezing. Well, below freezing at night, below 30 degrees. So
yeah.
All right. The East Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com is brought to you by Pure Adrenaline Motorsports, your source for pulse-pounding adrenaline sports apparel and accessories that ensure you have what you need to unleash your inner beast. That Pure Adrenaline logo on your hat is almost on a parallel line with the logo we've got on the top corner of the screen.
It is. If I go that way and lift it up just a little bit. Yeah.
Looks good. Looks really good.
Yeah, I hooked you up with glasses. Now I got to hook you up with a hat.
Yeah, no doubt. And I need it this time of year when I go out in the sun. My dome is pretty exposed. Gets sunburned a lot if I'm not careful. So, yeah.
Well, a nice razor will just take the rest of that off, and then what you're doing is you're just, you're just matching the back to the front.
I'm leaning all the way in at that point, so I'm not quite ready to dive into the deep end yet. So,
well, you're really going to need one of these hats if that happens. But I'll get you. I'll hook you up.
No doubt.
I'll hook you up. For the people out there, you can grab any of your Pure Adrenaline Motorsports gear. You can, of course, get it online at now our website's changed to pamgear.com. That's PAMgear.com. You can pick it up at numerous different locations. And, of course, the glasses, you can get it all your Good to Go stores around southeast Idaho as well. You can also get it at Bill's Bike and Run, Ron's Tire, and Idaho Falls. Anyway, got a lot of good stuff. I was just down doing that kind of stuff in Phoenix. Just got set up with the nation's largest motocross dealer in the country. So,
wow, that's awesome.
A lot of fun.
Yeah. So you a business trip for sure. You're enjoying the nice weather, but still getting a lot done at the same time. So, as we are in the spring sports season here on the East Idaho Prepcast, IdahoSports.com, we talked about this where we're going to try and just pick a couple of topics to talk about each week because there's so much going on. There's just no way that we're going to be able to hit everything. And, we want to hear from the viewers / listeners as well. If there's a topic or a team or a player that you want us to talk about that you think isn't getting that exposure and the coverage they deserve, send me an email, Brandon@IdahoSports.com. And that's exactly what we're going to do this week, Lance. I got an email from a listener, and they said, could you break down Highland, specifically the Highland baseball and softball teams? Because, we've talked a lot about some of the baseball teams from District 6 here in the early going, but we haven't talked too much about what's going on in District 5 yet. So I thought this would be a nice breakdown this week. It's going to be kind of a Highland Ram flavored Prepcast. That sound okay?
Yeah. In fact, there's also a Highland in Utah. They are the Highland Rams, and they are the same colors as well. And they, by the way, have played each other on several different occasions, I believe, in football and possibly some other sports too.
Yeah, it always gets super confusing because I'll click on something Highland Rams and then I realize it's the one in Utah. So
that's right.
That's in Salt Lake City, right?
It is. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, Sugar House area, but yeah, Salt Lake Valley.
Right. So, yeah. So let's start with the Highland softball team because they are the team that's actually higher in their league standings than the baseball team. The baseball team at Highland has a better overall record, but the Highland softball team has a better conference record. So the Rams, as it sits right now, are 3-5 overall, but they have played a pretty tough schedule. They've played Owyhee and Rocky Mountain, two pretty good programs over in the Boise area.
Yeah, but they've gotten those double headers they played against them were also on the road. Yeah.
Yes.
Road, at Owyhee, at Rocky Mountain.
Yes, and then as they've gotten into conference play as well, so they're 3-5 overall, but that's deceiving. They're 2-1 in the league. Their lone loss actually came to Thunder Ridge by a single run, 15-14. So they're a run. I mean, they're 2 runs away from being 3-0 in the conference and tied with Rigby atop the standings. The Trojans are 3-0 in the league, 7-4 and 1 overall. But this is a Highland team that got the state last year and then went out pretty quickly. But they return a lot of those key pieces to this year's team, including Marissa Mauger, who's a great pitcher and a good batter as well. So this is a Highland team that's coming into the season now, and as now we're into conference play, that they've got expectations to get back to state.
Yeah, they do, and they should get back there. And this is the thing, even though they were quickly out at state last year, one thing about high school sports is every year you're dealt a different hand. For these guys, they got a lot of that hand back, and because of that, they carry that experience throughout this season. I mean, they got the 4-0 win over Madison, and then beat them 14-9 as well. This is a Highland team that the expectations are not only amongst themselves to go and do well, but a lot of people feel that they will do well in the postseason this year.
Yeah, and we talked about Mauger kind of leading the way in terms of pitching. She is the Rams' ace in the circle, but they've got other players they're relying on this year as well. Mauger right now a 5.81 ERA, but again, pretty tough competition, especially the teams over in the Boise area. And then when you look at the offensive statistics, Jenna Kearns, who's a great junior catcher, is kind of leading the team in all of the big offensive categories. 686 batting average. She's crushed 6 home runs already this year. She had a couple of big blasts against Rocky Mountain and Hawaii a couple weeks ago, and 14 RBIs as well. So when your pitcher and catcher are in sync and kind of leading the charge, that's a good foundation to start. Yeah,
it certainly is. I mean, those are such important positions. I mean, when you look at well, of course, we'll talk about baseball a little bit later, but softball. It's a different game. The ball's coming at a different angle instead of from top to bottom, it's bottom to top. When pitchers are throwing it, it's a different look, and you get some good pitchers out there, and it's amazing what it will do for your game.
Yeah, it's been pretty fun to watch, and so Highland, specifically that second Rocky Mountain, and so again, we talked about. They got swept by Hawaii and Rocky, but pretty competitive games, especially against Rocky Mountain. I mean, they lost the first game 15-14, again, losing by 1 run. The second game, Highland actually had the lead going into the final inning, and Rocky Mountain scored, I believe it was 6 times to win 22-17. I mean, that's just a heartbreaker.
Yeah, especially in a game where you've been able to put that many runs up on the board. I mean, I think if you talk to any of the players and any of the coaches and you say, hey, we're going to score 17 runs today, not knowing what the other team's going to do, you're going to say, well, that's a victory. We're going to come out with a victory in that game. 17 runs is a lot of points to put up on the board. And I mean, not only that, they put up 14 runs against Madison, 14 against Thunder Ridge, 14 against Rocky Mountain, 12 against Hawaii the first time. I mean, this is a team that can cross the plate.
Definitely. So we talked about Jenna Kearns, the junior catcher for Highland. She also plays volleyball, and she's an excellent volleyball player. We didn't talk about her enough during this past volleyball season. She was ranked nationally a couple of times and received some national awards from Max Preps throughout the season. Last year,
there were a number of players that got overlooked a little bit. You had that great Skyview team. You had that great Sugar Salem team that really kind of took the volleyball attention this year. And there were some players that were overlooked. Some of that's on us, right. To get them. But we tend to spend a little bit more time on the teams as a whole during that time of year. But you're absolutely right. She is worthy of that recognition, no question about it.
Definitely. And last year, Jenna Kearns had 10 home runs total. She's already at 6 this year, and we've still got half a season to go. And she really came through when it mattered most in the district tournament against Thunder Ridge. She hit 2 home runs to knock out the Titans and get Highland that district title. So as we look ahead at what's coming up for Highland, and they just had a big sweep yesterday, actually, of Madison. They won 4-0 and 14-9. Next Tuesday, they'll be at Idaho Falls, and then they've got 2 big games with Rigby that'll take place at Highland. and that is the top team in the standings right now. So if Highland wants to prove that they are once again the team to beat in this league, they're going to have to beat Rigby next week.
Yeah, well, I think that's massive for them. Of course, as far as conference goes, you've got to take care of those games. Idaho Falls a conference opponent as well, but they've got a couple games that they're going to spend down at the Cache Valley Invitational as well. They're going to see some very good teams from down in Utah and from some other states as well, and that gives you. I look at that, coming up towards the end of the season. They're doing that in late April, and that gives you an opportunity to even improve more and gain some more confidence going into your into the end of conference and into the state playoffs.
Definitely. That is a tournament where if they can get some confidence down and, get some mojo going, I agree. I think that could be really outstanding.
Yeah.
Highland is also working in a brand new coach this year, brand new head coach. Tisha Coverdell had been the previous coach for a really long time, and she retired after this past season. And so a new coach in Ralph Daniels, and that's always tough too when Highland's breaking in a new coach.
Yeah, that is, a new system, maybe not quite as drastic as it is in some of the other sports where there's a little more movement, but I'll tell you what, they end up changing kids' positions. Kids under one coach might play a certain position, under another might play a different one, and it always just changes things up a little bit.
Definitely. And that's, there's a lot of softball teams. Softball and baseball seem to have a high turnover amongst the coaching ranks. So
they do.
For 3-4 years, and then they're moving on to something else. And we're going to talk about the coaching carousel at the very end of this Prepcast today as well. I've got some thoughts on that. Okay. So that's Highland softball. They're, 3-5 overall, and that's not going to blow you away, but you got to look below that overall record and see that, okay, they're still doing pretty well in their conference, and they are right in the mix with Mauger and Kearns leading the way. Now let's talk Highland baseball, because they have a pretty solid overall record. When you break this thing down, they're 10-4. However, 1-2 in conference play. And so for Highland, it's kind of the opposite of the softball team, where they've gotten a lot of nice wins out of conference, but inside the conference, they just got swept by Madison. Well, they lost 2 of 3 to Madison. They play a doubleheader, and then they play a single game. So that's really put them in an early hole.
Well, one of the challenges they're looking at as well is they've only got 2 wins over 5A teams. As you go in, they got that 1 win over Eagle. Also, they picked up a nice win over Madison. Madison's got a very good team this year. But you look at their other wins. They came against good teams, but not against 5A competition. It was Pocatello, Skyline, Century, Preston, and so those are things they're going to have to take care of. Pardon me. There's actually 3 5A wins on the schedule. They picked up one against Centennial, where they scored 20 runs as well. But you got to start out by beating the teams in your conference. They got a big one coming up against Rigby, again, a doubleheader and a single, and then followed by Thunder Ridge. So Highland's got to step up and take care of that. And Highland has traditionally had good baseball players that have come through that system. They've had good teams.
Definitely. They got to state last year along with Idaho Falls. And again, the Tigers are just such a good program.
Sure.
Year in, year out. They're leading the way. 5-1 already in league play. They've already played 6 league games. Now they're just 7-6 overall, but the Tigers taking care of it where it counts within the conference. So
yeah, they certainly are.
When you look at this Highland baseball team and you take a look at some of the statistical leaders, right away, Gunnar Wilhelm Jr. jumps out to me, a .622 batting average. He's got 29 RBIs, 13 runs scored. I mean, a .622 batting average is pretty good. And it's not like he's 5 for 7. No, he's had 45 at bats, 49 plate appearances. That's a gaudy batting average.
That is a killer batting average. That's one that'll get some college scouts looking your direction for sure. When you have an average like that, because college scouts look over and say, hey, that's still, at the college level, that might very well translate over to a 300 plus average. As well. So certainly they're going to look at that. That is a phenomenal average. And I think Highland ends up just fine. this season. They've had some of these losses, against Lewiston, Rocky Mountain, the couple losses against a very good Madison team. And of course, that's a conference team as well. But I think Highland's going to end up okay, and baseball tends to be the kind of unsung sport in Idaho because it's not an Idaho High School Activities Association sanctioned sport, which, makes that, so on a lot of people, they don't put it as much on their radar. It's not something they can get information on the IHSAA site. However, it has given Idaho Sports some good opportunities to be able to cover those live events, video as well.
Yes, it's been our pleasure to broadcast state baseball tournaments across the state every single year, every single pitch. So Highland, Gunnar Wilhelm leads the way batting wise. The leader on the pitching staff, it's kind of been a couple of different guys. Wilhelm pitches. Drew Hymas has done pretty well. He's 2-0 with a 2.80 ERA. Of course, the big question for Highland is how do you replace a kid like Jackson Christensen, who was the unquestioned ace of the staff last year? He's now at the College of Southern Idaho.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things too, as you look at it, Brandon, is you have to have a committee of pitchers on your team. You cannot be, and that's the one position more than anything in baseball that you cannot just have one good guy and everybody else just be average to below average. You've got to have a group of people in your bullpen, people that can that can come out and make a difference. Otherwise, you have that single up game with 2 or 3 down games, before another up. And I think Highland is pretty bright in that spot this year. Again, I think we're going to see some kids that are different by the end of the season than they were at the first of the season. But Highland's got a pretty decent group of pitchers.
Yeah, when you look at the innings pitched, they've kind of got a top 4 here. Tolman, 18 2/3, Colton Sneddon, 14 1/3, Eddington, 13, and Hymas with 10. So that's a good, if they can just get those ERAs a little lower. Eddington with a microscopic 0.54 ERA, and Hymas pretty good at 2.80, and Sneddon at 3.91. If Tolman can bring his down a run or two, I agree. I think Highland's got really decent pitching. And then just like the softball team, where Jenna Kearns is the catcher, her brother Aaron Kearns is the starting catcher for Highland's baseball team. So how about that? 2 catchers in the family. That's pretty cool.
Well, it is. The rumor is that he can get it from home to second pretty dang quick.
Yeah,
which is a good one. I mean, that's you got a guy. You got to have a guy that can throw that over the middle. Again, I think Highland is poised to be able to do what they need to do. You talked about the ERA on there. They do need to bring that down. I think they've only got like 4 games where they've held teams, and maybe 5 games where they've held team in single digits. They've got to get that ERA down, but we also know they can put runs on the board. I mean, they've put up, 7, 19, 10, 10, 14, 20, 9, 15. I mean, they can put some runs up on the board, but they've got to get those ERAs down a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good formula for success for Highland, I think. And Kearns at catcher also has been atop the Max Preps leaderboard in terms of fielding percentage for a good chunk of the season as well. So if we look at this Highland team, they're 1-2 in conference, but the good news is they've still got tons of conference games still to come. You basically play everybody 3 times, so they're done with Madison. Right. They've still got Rigby, Thunder Ridge, and Idaho Falls. So if Highland can catch lightning here, they could run the table.
Yeah, and they've got a match with Twin Falls in between there as well. But it is. I mean, and I think you said it right. If Highland catches fire, Highland can run this table potentially, and finish out the season exactly where they want to be.
Now, that won't be easy. I made it sound so simple, but Idaho Falls especially looks very tough again this year. Thunder Ridge, kind of hard to tell. Sometimes they look good, sometimes they don't. And Rigby's really struggling. They're 0-3 in the league, 3-7 overall. So we will just have to wait and see. The big.
Then you start looking at the eastern part of the state, the western part of the state. Teams that one of the things you run into in the East is you tend on most seasons to seems like you have 3, 4, or 5 games early on in the season that end up getting canceled because of weather that they usually don't run into, at least not at the same rate out in western part of the state, get out to Boise and beyond. And I think this has been a good year for these Eastern teams to get some reps in. They haven't had the cancellations on slot as they've had, in some of the other years. And so I think we're seeing some better play at this point of the season than we have as well in others.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Like when you look at softball, Highland as a softball team has played 8 games so far. Idaho Falls has played 7. And you look at the teams over in Boise, they've played 12 and some have played 14
That's
games.
right.
You're talking
That's
about
right.
double the amount of games. So that's a big factor to consider as well. And then, when we talk about baseball in Pocatello, right away, I always think of Hallowell Park, right? It's such a great facility. They used to have minor league baseball there. They have the Gate City Grays that play there now. But here's the deal. It's a
shared
facility, almost like how for so long the 3 football teams from Pocatello, Century, and Highland all shared Holt Arena. Yeah. All 3 baseball teams share Hallowell Park, which makes scheduling kind of tricky sometimes.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, if you're a baseball junkie from a fan perspective, you can almost just set up a tent there and just stay, and there's going to be something going on most days.
Right. So to give you an idea of some of the challenges that a school at Highland is facing, and the schools in Idaho Falls might be in a similar boat, although I will say it is nice for Skyline in Idaho Falls to be able to use Melaleuca Field, the minor league ballpark. That's a pretty good ace up your sleeve.
It is. I actually called the 3A state championships there the year before the COVID cancellations.
I wish they would host more stuff for state. All the state tournaments this year are going to be in the Boise area.
Yeah, they are. In fact, I'll give you just a little bit of insight on that particular year. One of the things that we did, the 3A was held there that year. It was Lauren Jensen and myself that covered that for IdahoSports.com, and everybody in the state was saying, "Oh, we don't want to play down at Melaleuca because there's just so much rain, so much wind that year." We are the only facility that year, Melaleuca was, that didn't have rain out games during the state tournament. So we hosted every single game. It drizzled one of the games, but the weather could not have been better. And tournaments were getting, there were a number of the school-sized tournaments that ended up canceling, like their consolations and those games, in order just to get the field as dry as they could for the championship games. So Melaleuca, that is a great facility. Too bad they're not hosting there this year.
I know it's a big bummer. So the email we got from this Highland baseball softball fan wanted us to talk a little bit about the facilities or lack thereof that Highland runs into. She said they don't have an indoor training facility. They practice in the gym or a converted racquetball court, and they have to split that time with the softball team because the softball team is running into the same thing. She said they scrounge out cages to hit and places to throw, or get some generous help with the use of someone's backyard, a de facto facility. She said the Highland weight room gets overcrowded. There's a lot of athletes at Highland. The school in general had been a little overcrowded in recent years. She said salvaged turf, used equipment, small confined space. They find a way. It's definitely a far cry from the deluxe facilities we see in other areas. I think she's probably talking about Boise specifically. And for Hallowell Field, it's been there a long time. It's a great ballpark, like we said, but with that, the older ballparks sometimes can feel a little crowded. Aren't as nice as like for example a Melaleuca Field, right? Sure.
Well, and really what they're running into is something that is I don't want to say epidemic, but it's something that a lot of schools, particularly in Eastern Idaho, run into. Having to use gym early on in the season, and stuff just to get practices in. Tryouts are oftentimes taking place in a gym. You look at a place like Teton High School where the snow is that's the last place the snow leaves each year, and they have to play their first number of games on the road in order to, get out of the snow and have a place to play. I know Sugar Salem runs into it. I know, traditionally Madison has had some challenges with that as well. Of course, Madison's got an indoor facility, now with the, with the tennis courts and that half football field that they can do some indoor stuff. But that is a challenge that East Idaho teams run into, and it's hard because unless you get like a booster that steps up and builds you an indoor practice facility, something like that, which happens in places. There's places, you go down the Salt Lake Valley, and there's a lot of private facilities that these high schools we use that dang near have a full baseball field inside, and stuff that we just don't have here in Southeast Idaho.
Yeah, you mentioned that new beautiful facility that Madison has, and that they had the official opening of it last season, and that came about because of some donations. Yeah. The hard part with Pocatello is the school district. It encompasses the 3 high schools, and it's very hard to get those big donation type projects passed through because they don't want one school having all the nice amenities and the other 2 being kind of neglected.
Well, that's right. And I mean, and as far as there's only so much money to go around too. That's district money. So you have to rely on private donations and different things like that, and since sometimes places can get those and sometimes they struggle to get them. And I think Highland just might be in that boat, right now, but you never know. There's always fundraisers and other things out there that potentially could be done. But the fan who wrote in was right on point with that. There are some challenges with that, and they're not insignificant challenges. They are significant challenges because they can put a team back on their heels and kind of behind the 8 ball, so to speak, early on in the season against teams that are able to get out there and get the reps in that they need.
Definitely. In terms of like booster clubs, I don't know that there's one better than Highland. They call them the Ramrodders, and they're awesome. They step up in so many fantastic ways. And if it were up to the Ramrodders, Highland would have all these nice facilities and all these amenities, but there's so much bureaucracy they've got to go through, and it's just impossible.
It's a challenge. If there's one team in a district, that's one thing. They'll accept any of the booster money they can, to help raise things. But when there are 3 teams, it's like, well, what advantage does this give the other teams in our that are within our school district? So there's definitely some challenges.
Yeah, for sure. So we wanted to shine the spotlight on Highland a little bit. They kind of get forgotten about sometimes, especially being the only 5A team in District 5 as well. They can kind of get over. Can get overshadowed sometimes by those Idaho Falls schools. So Highland baseball and softball still have plenty of road in front of them, and both teams got to state last year. We could definitely see something like that again this year. And again, big thanks to the Highland fan who wrote in and asked us to talk about it a little bit. At the very end of her email, she also said, this is non-Highland, but Blackfoot had a softball player last week against Skyline, and she hit a grand slam to send the game into a walk-off basically by the 10-run rule. Yeah. And this was her first ever home run that went outside the park. And so that's awesome. Junior outfielder Asia Martinez for Blackfoot. How cool is that?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
And again, those are the things that we aren't always aware of. So if there are cool stories like that are out there that you want us to talk about, again, just send me an email, Brandon@IdahoSports.com. Keep them coming. We love to talk about our local teams and athletes and players. We just can't get to everybody every single week. So before we duck out of here, Lance, the other big news this week out of East Idaho was, it's that time of year where the coaching carousel kind of gets up and going, and Snake River's football coach, Jeb Harrison, turned in his resignation. Now, the way it was worded was, he said, I was asked to resign. And that always, can be contentious. Sounds like it wasn't his choice. And it sounded like you resign or we're just not going to renew your contract.
Yeah.
And a little behind the scenes for these coaches, they have a 1-year contract every year, basically. And you get to the end of the school year. You get to the end of the school year.
I mean, we've seen it where coaches have won a state championship, and after the next year they struggle and get asked to leave. Makes it hard sometimes to build a program that way. I oftentimes think back of the great John Wooden and what he did at UCLA. Well, people don't realize it took him 5 years to have a winning season. Yes. There, in today's ball game, we would have never heard of John Wooden because that, they never would have stuck with him during that period of time. And, the rest for him is history. And I think anybody would give up those first 5 years of building that program in order to have the history that followed. Yeah, for sure. And so again, we don't know what is going on with that Snake River football. It could be a personality thing. It could be, didn't like the way, he was interacting with the players, or it could be, just wasn't winning enough, which again, I find that hard to believe. He got
Snake River to the playoffs 5 of the 6 years he was the football coach there. Now, the problem is Snake River is used to a certain standard with Tom Harrison. That's Jeb's father, who coached at Snake River for a long time.
And Tom won another championship this year with Weezer.
Yes, that's now the 11th state championship in Tom Harrison's career. He is the Vince Lombardi of high school football.
I believe 9 of those came at Snake River.
Yes.
So Snake River is not just good enough to make it to the playoffs. You've got to be contending for a state championship, or at least in that picture for a state championship during those runs to the state playoffs as well.
Now, I will say this. If that is the basis, just not winning enough, be careful what you wish for, because there's no guarantee that the next guy that comes in is going to be able to do what Jeb Harrison did. That's the risk.
No one who's come in after him has been able to do what he did. So
right,
that's always a challenge. That's always a challenge. The saying has always been that you never want to be the guy that follows the legend. You want to be the guy that follows the guy that followed the legend, because it's the guy that followed the legend that usually gets ousted, and then the next guy comes in, and then people can say, okay, now we can have some patience, But it is interesting, we see it at the pro level, we see it at the college level, but it has come down to the high school level as well.
And there's a lot of burnout in coaching right now. A lot of good coaches are getting burned out by a lot of behind the scenes stuff that has nothing to do with the sport they're coaching.
Yeah, that's right. Parents, number one. That's the number one reason is parents. Administrators, can cause an issue. Well, and really, when you look at the most successful teams in the state, you'll find usually better than average parents to deal with, and usually fantastic administrators who stand behind coaches. So,
yes, and you got to have consistency. That's the other thing too. If you're turning over coaches all the time, it's almost impossible to build something up. And with so many good coaches getting out of the biz, so to speak, if you've got a good one, I think you're more inclined to hang on to him. But
I look at Bob Coombs, also at Snake River. What a fantastic job he's done in basketball over these. Just shy of 30 years, I think, had his 500th win this season. Well, he hasn't had great teams every single year, but he's had consistency because they've stayed with him. And even teams that they've had maybe that were not quite as talented as other teams, they've still been competitive, because he's such a good coach and so consistent in what he does. And I think that right there is a sign that hey, you're going to be dealt different hands. Sometimes you're tall, sometimes you're short, sometimes you're fast, sometimes you're slow. But if there's some consistency there, you're going to have more success than not. And it is tough when you're changing coaches a lot to have consistency.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing an official shortage, referee shortage, a coach shortage, and to me, it all comes back to the common theme of the parents. Most parents, it's just like anything in society. 95% of the parents are awesome.
Yep.
It's that other 5% that just ruin it for everybody.
That's the 5% take up 95% of the time, and they're the ones that should probably be given the least amount of time. I'm just speaking that from an honest point of view.
Yeah, I think there needs to be some inward reflection with some, and
because most are very good. Like you said, 95% of parents, awesome. They're supportive. Not that they never get frustrated or things like that, but they're supportive. They do things the right way. But then you do get that handful, that small percentage, and they are a vocal minority, and they really raise havoc for a lot of people.
Yep. So we'll keep an eye on other coaching developments, and hopefully the carousel's not too crazy this offseason. But that'll do it for this week's edition of the East Idaho Prepcast. Got a little softball, got a little baseball, got a little football coaching in, and we're now turning the page. We're into April. We've got some big tennis, competitions coming up this month. We've got Lance. I'm pretty excited about this. IdahoSports.com is going to be broadcasting the DirectCom Invitational at Idaho State University's Davis Field. There's going to be 31 teams at this track meet. It's officially being hosted by Rockland, and that is going to be on Friday, April 22nd. It's going to be so awesome.
Well, Rockland doesn't have as many kids in their school. In fact, they don't even have as many people in their town as the number of kids that will show up to compete in this event. So good for Rockland. to that. Davis Field is a beautiful track facility, by the way. Beautiful. It's also their soccer facility. Years and years and years ago, before the Dome, it was their football facility too. But it's pretty much a dedicated track soccer facility now, and it's a great place to compete.
Yeah, so mark that on your calendars. Friday, April 22nd, IdahoSports.com will have live coverage of the DirectCom Invitational track and field meet in Pocatello. Lance, you and I are going to be there for that.
We will. We'll be there.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. So we still got a couple weeks to go before then. So I'll let you get back to enjoying your family time. Thank you for squeezing us in. We appreciate it. So
thanks, guys.
Yes.
PamGear.com. PamGear.com.
That's right. PamGear.com for pure adrenaline motorsports, your source for pulse pounding, adrenaline, sports apparel, and accessories that ensure you have what you need to unleash your inner beast. For Lance Taylor, I'm Brandon Baney. We'll see you next time on the East Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.